Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks for joining me here for another week. This week, I have Joey Chandler of Find Your Way Consulting on the podcast. Joey is going to share with us his experience as a dad, his experience as a professional coach, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with him. So, Joey, thanks very much for joining me here on the podcast. I'm excited to get into it today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So before we get into the nitty gritty of everything, for those of you that don't know you, those on the podcast that don't know you, give me the overview of the Joey Chandler story.
Joey Chandler. Let's see. So I am a dad. I got a 17-year-old son, and I have been on a journey. My consulting is called Find Your Way, and I think we are all on a journey to find our way of doing things. And I have taken the kind of the approach that, honestly, we're all kind of stubborn and that we're not so good at listening to other people. And so rather than trying to teach people new things, why not help people figure out who they are and what they're about and then just get better at using that? And this has helped me recover from burnout. It's helped me stay grounded. It's helped me when I get angry at my son. It's just helps me a lot of different ways. And I think I think there's great value in people really understanding who they are, especially when you're a dad and you know your foundation is one very strong, but also very uncertain because you just it's everything is new every single day as a dad. So I think people being grounded in who they are and how they operate is really really helpful.
That's great. And one of the things when I was doing a bit of research for the podcast that really stood out to me, you talk about core values quite a bit in the stuff that you are put out there, and obviously within your coaching and your courses. And I guess the first question I want to lead off with is, why is knowing your core values important for dads or parents?
Well, I think it's important for anybody because they really act as the foundation for who you are. They don't tell you so much like what actions to take, but they do tell you how you want to take those actions or what the experience that you want to leave yourself and other people on. My core values are courage, celebration, and curiosity. So I can make sure I can ask myself, am I experiencing courage? Am I experiencing celebration? Am I experiencing curiosity? And make adjustments from that. If you I really got clear on my core values 2.5 years ago now. I burnt out really bad. I was going through a divorce. I was living alone. It was post COVID. My business was struggling. Just a bunch of less than great things. And I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm done. Like I got no energy left. I can't be anybody but me. I'm just too exhausted. And I had been a coach before that, so I had some idea of who I was and things. But I heard a story at that point about the Navy SEALs, the U.S. military group here, and they put things in sets of three. And because apparently when you're getting shot at, you can remember three things better than four or five. And so I said, literally, I was just like, screw it. I'm like done. I'm like, it sounds easier. So I reduced my core values down to three things. And that made a huge difference because as soon as I could do that, then I could create a system for using them. And my system for using them, again, this was not in a super well thought out system, but I just woke up each day and I said, hey, how can I bring some courage or some curiosity to my day? And then I could take an action. And on some days, that was getting up, getting a drink of water and getting back into bed because that's all the energy I had. And I could celebrate that. Other days it was doing a little bit more. And I found that over time you have a few baby steps, and those baby steps lead to big steps. And then eventually I was able to recover. So ultimately for me, your core values are really helpful I don't know if I can use profanity on this, but basically when the shit hits the fan, knowing your core values is really, really helpful because you can take a deep breath and say, okay, how can I use or bring more of my core values to the situation?
That's great. And so, like, one of the things that I talk about a lot with, like within the podcast and within the program, one thing that's been important to me, and it sounds very similar. And I'd be interested in your opinion as to whether it's similar or not. Like, I put it as priorities, right? So I always talk about ranking things based off your priorities, because one of the things that I've come up across over the last 15 years of being a coach, especially in the health and fitness space, is people say that they don't have time. And understanding what's important to you and why it's important to you, and then prioritizing your time based off that is kind of the foundation of what I say is core values for you. Are they similar to priorities? Where do you see the differences there?
So I would say, I can you give me an example of a priority, like so I understand what you mean by it?
So like family is a priority, right? So when we talk about when I talk about priorities, it's almost like they're not independent of each other, like they're interlinked to each other. So like family and health are an interlinked priority, because you need to be healthy in order to serve your family, provide for your family, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm just I guess that I'm very interested because I love the idea of core values, and it's been something that's kind of come into my sphere a little bit over the last 12 months. Like, I've heard different people talk about it on podcasts, and I'm interested from somebody like yourself, where this is the forefront of what you teach, like how you see the differences between priorities and the similarities. Are they interlinked? Like, where do you see that crossover?
Yeah. So I would say priorities are something that are crucial, but will probably change more throughout your life. Obviously, when you start dating someone, then you get married, and then you have a kid, and then so on and so on. Those you're going to have different priorities, but underneath that, your core values will be much more constant. And the idea is that if you can imagine that we all have something at our core, it's love or joy or happiness, it's something, and our core values help us experience more of that thing. That core thing has been with us for a very long time. Some you might say before we were born, it's part of a spirit, a soul. Like I don't know where it comes from. All I know is that we all got something, and that something has been with us long before we were dating, we were married, we were kids. It will be there after, once you get divorced, it will be there. So your core values are underneath all of that. And then the question is okay, are my priorities, do they reflect and support who I am? Do they reflect and support my core values? Does this, yes, it may be courageous to eat this whole thing of ice cream, but does that reflect and support, like the sense of being able to celebrate my body and, in the next summer, or, things of that sort. So it's a little bit of an engagement, but the more clear you are on your core values, then you can start to say, hey, this is, these things fit with me, these things don't. And the more you practice, and this is a big part, it's like working out. The more you practice saying, hey, what are my core values? Does this actually align with that? You just get stronger at sensing, be able to say yes or no faster.
Yeah, that's great. That's so I guess what I'm hearing is, with the core values are almost a constant throughout the life. And one of the things that, when it comes to priorities, because I do talk about, priorities are going to change depending on what season of your life you're in. It's very different when we're a young 20-year-old man and we've only got ourselves to worry about, compared to when, I'm right now, 40, father of two kids, wife. Like, I've got all these other people in my life that I've got to worry about. My priorities are completely different, because I can't be as selfish in this season of my life, because there's others relying on me. Whereas the core values, from what you're saying, they're a consistent thing throughout life. And yeah, no, that's really helpful. And without giving away, I guess, the secret sauce too much, how do you come to those core values? Is it like a brainstorming session with somebody? What do you like, what's the process to get to that point?
Yeah, no, it's actually quite simple, and the reason for this is that you can imagine our core values are much more present and much more, um, they're closer to the surface than we realize. We like to think that there's this really complicated process, and I developed this process, it must have been 6 or 8 years ago, and it just works. And I'll just ask the questions. I don't gatekeep this. This is the basics for everything. Basically, you want to ask yourself the question: when I interact with people, how do I want them to feel? And generally speaking, people want other people to feel like safe or heard or motivated or inspired. There's some language like that. Then you want to think, okay, when I feel that, whatever those words are that you said, like to say, it's like, I want people to feel safe, motivated, and heard, if that's an example. When I feel safe, motivated, and heard, what is the experience like for me? You want to get present to like when you are like, wow, I feel those things. And then, and this is important to realize, is because remember I said our core values have been with us since we were a long time. So the first times we would have interacted with it, it would have been when we were in a young person. Even if we didn't know exactly what they were, we would have interacted it. So the idea is you think, okay, when I experience those things, how does it make me feel? And how would I describe that in the language of a young person? And generally speaking, what you're going to find is that core thing is something, it's one of, at least in the English speaking world, it's love, joy, happiness, excitement, or freedom. Those are the top 5 things that we have at our core. And then to figure out our core values, you pick 3 words that help you experience more of those. So like who I'm at my core is love. And for me, love is about celebration, courage, and curiosity. So love is celebrating yourself and other people. This is for me. It's celebrating, myself and them. And it's being curious. I think staying curious in a relationship is so very important, and it's so very helpful. And to me, love is about courage, because when I think of love, I think of those moments when you ask someone out on a date, or when you said, will you marry me, or what you said, I love you, the first time. All of that, like that feeling of uncertainty and excitement and energy, and all of that, to me is an important part of love. And
That's
so
great.
when you go through that process, you'll come up with 3 words, and those, you'll find that those are, they may change, you may modify as you get more clear on them. I'm not going to say that you're going to pick the first 3, but there will be 3 words that you can use over and over again. And you'll see that they show up more often than you think.
When you're working with somebody, and try to put this question in a way where it's relatively concise. But when you're working with somebody, do you find that, especially in today's day and age, with all the extra noise that we have and all this extra input that we get, that people, when they're working with you to come up with these core values, come up with maybe core values that don't relate to them, like they latch on to things that potentially they've heard from other people, or that maybe they're seeing a lot of, and it causes friction within their life when they do that, like when they're trying to live towards a core value that's maybe not theirs, that they've latched on from somewhere. And a lot of that maybe has to do with social media and all this extra noise that we've got these days. Do you find that a lot, or not so much?
I find when people come to me and they say, "Hey, I know my core values," and I'm like, "Awesome, tell them to me," and they'll tell me some words that are intellectual, like authentic is a big one, or even honestly, family as a core value is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But because the idea here, and the reason that how I get around kind of that intellectual thing, because we want something that lands in your heart and your gut, right? If it lands in your heart and your gut, then it's more likely true to you, as opposed to something that you think sounds good. And we get around that by that question of saying, hey, when you felt this, how would you describe that in the language of a young person? Because then that gets down to like who you were when you were 10, 11, 12. And that to me is where is very true and it's very authentic. And but a lot of the times where they say, hey, pick 10 words from this list of 50, then choose 5, and then choose those, we end up picking what we sound like, or what we think we should be, or how it sounds, or what sounds good. But so yes, it happens. But the fun part is once you go through that process, you identify your core values, you can immediately look back through your life and say, hey, that core value showed up here, here, and here. Did not show up there. Wow, it really did not show up there. I really messed up there. But it, and then you can start to use it. And that's why if you get your core values down to 3 words that you can use on a regular basis, you share them with other people, then they start to become more true. I have a word. I have one word that's celebration. It used to be connection, and I'm trying to figure it out. It's I'm working on it. Connection and celebration are very close to me for me, and I'm trying to solve it. It may be it goes back and forth a little bit, and because I have two that have been solid, courage and curiosity. I've been solid for multiple years now. That third one, I've been kind of wiggle room with, and I think that's okay. As long as the thing is, as long as you own it, when you own it, then if you change it, then own that. And then I say it's okay. But I actually can I tell a story about
Of
how
course.
this is why knowing your core values and sharing them with the people you love makes a huge difference when the shit hits the fan. So I moved to a new town, Reno, Nevada, in the end of December. January 20 something, I was rock climbing with my son. It was bouldering in a gym, fell, broke my leg in 3 places. Huge crack. I'm like, pain like I hadn't felt in years. Everyone was like, "Whoa, what happened?" Like it was bad right away. So we go to this hospital, and it turns out my leg was broken in 3 places. So it was up by the knee and down by the ankle. So you can imagine, like, I just couldn't get comfortable at all. Like, and so I'm in the emergency room. I'm kind of moaning and groaning, and my son says, "Dad, which one of your core values is missing right now?" And I'm like, and he's being a smartass. I mean, this was not like fully transformed. He's totally being a smartass, but he knew to ask me that question because I had said this 1.5 million times. And he's like, you're always saying that if there's a problem, one of your core values is missing, and clearly there's a problem here. So which one's missing? And I looked at him, and I of course I wanted to kind of give him a backhand, but I said, wait, let me think about this. And I realized I was really scared. I just moved to town. There's just, leg was busted. And I said, okay, I got to make some courage here. Let me bring a little bit of courage. And that helped me calm me down. And then I started thinking about curiosity. And I said, I wonder what life is. I'm going to learn about life that with having a broken leg that I wasn't going to learn by having 2 healthy legs. What was I going to learn about life? And I can't tell you that I remember it. I thought of anything brilliant or even memorable during that time, but I can tell you that having that question helped me get through the uncertainty of, waiting for the doctor, waiting for the x-rays, waiting for the news. Do I have to have surgery? All of that uncertainty, having my core value and just kind of having it percolate in my brain just helped me get through that. And fortunately I didn't have to have surgery, and my leg is now healed, and I'm starting to hike again, and I'm, doing that. But I'll never forget that. Dad, which one of your core values is missing? It was such perfect coaching. It was like he could not have asked me a better question, and I still wanted to give him a backhand. But yeah. And so to me, knowing your core values is so crucial when things don't go well.
Yeah, that's thanks for sharing that. That's a good story, and it also highlights too how kids can be such a mirror of us when their default mode becomes a mirror of us even when they're under stress. Like, they observe what we do, and then that comes back on us sometimes at the most inconvenient times. But yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I just pivot a little bit away from the core values and have a chat about just your experience as a father. And just one question that I ask a lot of people that I have calls with is like, what's been your most difficult point as a dad?
So my son, before he was 11, 10, had 7 broken bones and a dislocated hip, all from different sports. No, it wasn't because he had fragile bones. These were like straight up ski accidents, baseball, football, biking, like really hard things. And, but here's the crazy part. Like those sucked. And that was seeing my son, the time he broke his hip, we were mountain biking, and he he missed a turn and ended up going off of a bank about 12 feet onto a road, and his if you can imagine him falling down, his seat hooked his hip, and it and fortunately it did, because it slowed him down enough. It dislocated his hip, but it slowed him down enough to where he crashed. He cracked his collarbone and broke his helmet. But had he not hooked himself on his hip, you can imagine it would have been, I don't even, you can't even imagine that. So like those are awful. Those are awful. But my son has OCD, and anybody who has to deal with OCD or anxiety or any of that kind of stuff, it is awful. It is beyond awful. It is something that we're working on. We're doing the work, we're doing the therapy, we're doing everything. And it is hands down, not even a close second to absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done, is dealing with an amazing kid, a kid of ridiculous talent, be hindered and held back and struggle and not know what to do and to give up and to be saying everything's okay, Dad, this is not a problem. Dealing with that is it's impossible. I mean, there are times when it feels impossible.
I can only imagine. And what do you personally do to help you through that? I get it's probably an ongoing process, but are there steps that you take to help yourself through that? Like, navigate the tough times. What does that look like?
Yeah. So this is something I'm going to have to go back a little bit to core values just for this to explain.
Yeah, go for
this.
it. Yep.
So I burnt out. When I burnt out and I went hog wild in core values, dove deep into them. I was like, core values are everything. But after a while, maybe 6 or 8, 10 months, I started to see that it just wasn't working. It wasn't producing the results that I wanted for myself and for my clients to just talk about core values. And from that, I started to realize that there's a difference between who we are and how we operate. I know you, in one of your podcasts, you talked about core values being an operating system. And I actually don't think that's true. Core values are the foundation. They give you a guide to where to go, but there's the actions that you take are something what I call your core process, how you actually accomplish things. And by getting clear, and this is something I've been working on, and OCD has kind of helped this, but by getting clear on how I operate, when I operate at my best, when all the crud comes up from the OCD and life and family, and him and myself and his mom are divorced, but we're on very good terms. But even still, it's still really hard. So what I've started doing, and it really is been life changing, is that I journal every morning. And my core process, the way I do things, I have 5 steps. Is I celebrate what I did the day before. I talk about where I struggled. I say, hey, what are my goals? What's the plan to achieve those goals? And what actions can I take today to further those plans? And when I take those actions, it gives me something to celebrate the next day. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I have found, and this is actually something I've learned since I broke my leg, because I started really doing this over the past couple of months, is having a practice that, one, celebrates what I have accomplished. Because, as a dad, it feels like you're either not doing enough or not getting credit for what you have done, right? Like there's some version of that. So bringing celebration to the front has been a game changer. So I celebrate, my son and I went this morning, yesterday, my son and I lifted weights together. So I put that down as a win. That's something that I celebrate that. And then I honor the struggles, the things that sucked. And I'll be honest, today I had a bunch of struggles. I was really present to a bunch of frustrations, and I wrote them all out. It was just crazy. I was like, wow. And then I talk about my goals, and I talk about my plans, and I talk about the actions, and it allows me to do it. And I've done this now a couple months. And what I'm seeing is that having that, being clear on how I operate, and everybody has their own, those are my steps. Everyone has their own steps. By getting clear on my process, by putting it to use every day, by honoring what I have done yesterday, even if it's something small, like lifting weights is not the biggest thing in the world, but that was a big thing for me. And doing that every single day, it gives me this great, it gives me a stronger foundation. Just as an example, this was a few weeks back. I come into the kitchen, and in the kitchen, this was like I have to take my son to school at 7:50. I come to the kitchen at 7:40. My son is still asleep. And in the kitchen is a pancake. There's a bowl with pancakes in it. There's his plate with the syrup and this crusty pancake, and then the fry pan. That's still, it's all just in there. And what had happened was the night before, we didn't have anything for dessert. So he made himself pancakes. But the rule is that you leave the kitchen spot, like that, you just leave the kitchen clean. So, and he's still sleeping, and this is 10 minutes before we have to leave, right? And so I'm like, I'm and we had talked about this a bunch of times, and so I'm about to blow my top, but I've been journaling, and I'm like, okay, let me think about how I can celebrate here. So I go into his room, and I'm like, son, his name is Lucius. I'm like, Lucius, I just want to honor you that you took care of your needs. You wanted dessert. You made pancakes. That's awesome. But I also just want to let you know that because you didn't clean up, I now have to clean up, and we're going to be late for school. And I just want to let you know that that's just not cool. And the thing that made a difference in that moment was normally what I would have done. I either would have gone in to his room, yelled at him a bunch of times, or did everything and yelled at him afterwards. But this time I was doing the dishes, and I just talked to him. I said, hey, this is the reality. Awesome that you did it. But the struggle that you caused is that I now have to take care of this. It messes with our plans. It messes with our the goal that we have to get on school on time, our plans, our actions, they all get messed up. And that was like the first time where I can remember taking a moment inside of the anger, inside of the frustration, and saying, wait a minute, how can I bring some celebration here? And how can I talk inside of that moment? And I'm not saying that it transformed his life. I'm not saying that he got it 100%, but I know I acted better. And it's later that day, I got angry at him. So I batted 500 that day in terms of being a non-angry dad. But that is really helping me. And every morning now I'm doing that journaling, and it's really, really helping me. Not just because I think sometimes being a dad feels so powerless, right? You're just like, what can I do? Like, I'm never right. I never, your kid's angry at you. Like your wife's angry at you. The school's angry at you. Like, just never feels like it's enough. And by celebrating myself, by having that plan, knowing how I operate, using it, it's giving me a sense of like, hey, I can do this.
I love the word celebration too, because I think that that's such a commonly missed point when you're in the thick of everything, where just taking that time to appreciate what we have, the little things, like you said, like the lifting session with your son, and also articulating that to our kids as well too, because it's so often easy to get caught up in our own shit and what we're dealing with, and not, let everybody, like, life can be pretty good if we let it be good. It's one of those things where, and there's always going to be stuff we've got to work through and stuff we've got to do, but celebration, as you've been talking about that, it's just been one thing that's, every time you say it, it's a word that really jumps out to me, because it often gets lost when we're all constantly go and don't get the opportunity to stop and just go, hey, like, this was actually a really cool moment for me today. This little thing that may seem, inconspicuous to somebody else was actually a big part of my day.
Absolutely. And I actually intentionally, and where it came from is I was working with clients, and we were developing their process, and the general process that people go through. It's not 100%, but generally what happens is that we connect with somebody, we figure out what their needs and wants are, we help we figure out what their goals are, their goals, we come with a plan, we take action, and we celebrate, or we revise the plan and celebrate. So celebration is usually at the end of something. And what I was seeing with a lot of clients were that they would say to themselves, it's like, oh yeah, I'm way better at celebrating other people than celebrating myself. Like just 100%. And it really just as I'm like, well, okay, well, let's just move celebration to the top. And I did this for clients first. And I moved it. We just said, we're going to celebrate things first. And I could see had an immediate impact on people because they were like, oh, well, I did this, this, and this. And then it gave them the kind of the confidence, the energy, the boost to go do whatever work that they had to do. And then what showed up for me was I was doing my taxes and I had put off doing my taxes and I was thinking about it and I didn't make the money I wanted to the year before and I was going to owe money. Like it just was not good. And I'm sitting there and I'm resisting and putting them off. And finally I'm like, you know what? I am not present to celebration here at all. And I said, okay, well, let me move celebration to the top. And I thought about what I had accomplished in the past year. What could I celebrate in the past year? And so then I listed those things out. And by listing those things out, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I did a bunch of different things. And it just gave me the foundation to do my taxes. Taxes still sucked. I still owed money. It was still bad, but I had the energy and the focus to get them done. And that's something that I wasn't doing. And since that day, I intentionally moved celebration to the top. Even with new clients, people I've never met before, my first question now is like, hey, what can we celebrate about you? What have you done? What have you accomplished recently that you're proud of? Because it gets them in a state of mind like they have accomplished something. And it's much, much easier to accomplish something new if you already realize that you've accomplished much of the stuff already. And that little shift it's life-changing. It's been a huge difference for me. It makes a huge difference for my clients because we're so bad at honoring who we are and what we have accomplished. Move that up to the top. It makes a world of difference.
And on celebration, what's been a highlight for you as a dad? What's been one of your, I guess, quote unquote, proudest moments that you've had? I'm sure there's many of them, but if you could tell us a story about one, what's that?
Yeah. Proud moment for me, obviously there's a bunch. But the one that really stood out is my son was playing baseball and he was young. He was like 9 or 10. He was, it was a little guys, but he's up to bat and he fouled a ball off of his shin and drew blood, like cried instant, everything cried, coaches ran out. Like it was kind of bad. And he said, okay. And he got him back up. Next pitch, fouled the ball off his shin again. Cry, drop, everybody, and everybody's just like tear. And my son's like, I can do this. And then he got up and he hit a single and he ran, got to first base. And among our dad friends, everybody has their stories about their kid, but like that's the story that everybody talks about my son, is just that determination that he had. And he it's such a great question because I'm on my brain now is like, well, there's this moment. It is pretty amazing. That's that celebration part, right? To like really think about all the times when he did something incredible. It's that's a fun thing to do for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I like to ask that, because again, it's something that we don't take enough time to sit there and celebrate, like the little things. And every person I've asked that question of, it seems that there seems to be a common theme of watching their kids overcome something. Like it's just something that I'm seeing where it's like seeing their kids with that inbuilt resilience and being able to overcome some form of obstacle. And it's it's very interesting to see people try and narrow down almost a life of experiences to one thing. It's
Well, then instantly you go to like, well, maybe there's a better one, right? Like maybe I should share that one. Like that went through my head. But yeah, it's true. That scene, I can remember that baseball because that's the thing that other people talk about. They see your kid overcoming something, and they will talk about that and remind you of that over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a closing. I've got a closing, I guess, tradition that I'm trying to implement. Now, I've actually completely stolen this off another podcast, and I think it's just a really cool thing to do. So, this podcast I've stolen it off is Diary of a CEO. And what he does is at the end of each podcast, he gets the last guest to leave a question for the next guest. And so, not knowing who they're leaving it for and not knowing who's asked it. But the one I've got for you today to finish off is, what's a moment in your life that at the time seemed overwhelming, but in hindsight turned into a positive?
Oh, when I burnt out. That day that I woke up when I was like, I got nothing left. Like I can remember that day. I don't remember the exact day, but it was early in January. And I just was like, I'm done. I got nothing. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know anything. Like I just didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that I couldn't be anything but myself. And then a few days later, I said, okay, well, if I can only be me, then who am I and how can I be more of that? And those 3 or 4 days have been dramatically have changed my life. But yeah, in that moment, I was like, I'm done. I'm like, I got nothing. I got absolutely nothing left. I couldn't. And in hindsight, it was an amazing thing. Like for whatever reason, that's what it took for me to really start saying, who am I and how can I be more of that? And it taught me so much about coaching, because so oftentimes coaching, we coach at a high level. We try to reach, we wanted them to be best. But the fact is that we end up losing people who fall out from the bottom. So now all of my coaching, I think, can I deliver this to somebody who was in that same spot that I was? Can I talk to that person who's totally burnt, totally toast, totally frustrated? Can I talk to them? And that makes me a better coach. So that moment taught me a ton of different things.
That's great. Well, I'm very appreciative of your time and mindful of your time. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can do this again.
Sure thing.
All right.